I'm sorry, but we can't help you. We have a trip booked. That's what my parents said when I asked them to co-sign a loan so my daughter, my 18-year-old daughter, could get emergency spinal surgery that might prevent permanent paralysis. 3 days later, they boarded a $14,000 luxury cruise with my sister and her kids. I didn't yell. I didn't beg. I didn't even reply. But I remembered. And exactly 2 weeks later, I stood in front of their house holding an envelope that would rip their entire world apart. My name is Helen. I'm 36. I've paid my own bills since I was 19. I helped my parents with theirs for years. But the one time I needed a signature, just a signature, they told me they couldn't tie their names to something like that. Something like that being the surgery that saved their granddaughter's spine. So I didn't scream. I took notes. And when the truth about what they stole finally came to light, I didn't warn them. I served them. And now they're the ones who can't afford to stand tall. Have you ever been betrayed by your own parents? Tell me in the comments. Because this time, silence wasn't strength. It was strategy. It wasn't my first night sitting upright in a hard plastic chair, but it was the first time I did it watching my daughter sleep. IV in her arm, monitors blinking, spine fractured. I kept staring at the clock like maybe if I glared long enough, the minutes would move faster. Hila's accident happened on a Thursday. She was in the passenger seat, belted in, when another driver ran a red. The next thing I knew, I was racing down the hospital corridor. Her face was bruised, her voice quiet. But she was conscious. Stable, they said. Until they said something showed up on the scans. By Saturday morning, they said the word I hadn't dared to think. Surgery. There were 2 options. 1. Advanced, low risk, high success, but not covered. 2. Covered, cheaper, and 20% more likely to result in nerve damage. Possibly even paralysis. I didn't hesitate. We'll do the first one, I said. The surgeon nodded, but his next words hit harder than the diagnosis. We'll need to schedule it for tomorrow morning. I stepped into the hallway and called my parents. My dad answered. Hey kiddo, what's going on? Isla needs surgery, I said. There's a better option, but it's not covered. I need help with the cost, just a cosign. He went quiet. Are you sure it's not covered? I've checked. There's no time to fight it. They need an answer today. Then my mom's voice cut in. Have you appealed the insurance? Mom, this isn't a clerical issue. This is a clock ticking on her spinal cord. Another pause. Then soft and reasonable, my dad said. The timing is just really unfortunate. My mom added, we leave Monday. The resort won't refund after the 7-day mark. $14,000. That's what their trip cost. Hila could end up paralyzed, I said. You're being unfair, my dad snapped. We're not doctors. I wasn't asking for their degrees, just their names. They still said no. And for the first time in my life, I realized my parents were willing to risk my daughter's future to preserve their own comfort. I hung up without saying goodbye. Not because I was angry, but because something inside me had finally snapped into place. I sat on a bench just outside the hospital, staring blankly at a pigeon limping across the sidewalk. It was missing a toe. I remember wondering if it had a name, if its parents would have paid for surgery, if they could. I felt numb, not shocked, because on some level I already knew who they were. But there's a difference between suspicion and confirmation. This was confirmation. I didn't cry. I opened my laptop and applied for the emergency loan. I signed through clenched teeth. No cosigner meant I'd only qualify for a third. And I still needed more than twice that amount by morning. I didn't want to call them again, but I had no choice. It was around 6 p.m. when I dialed, sitting cross-legged on the tile floor outside Isla's room, fingers shaking over the screen. This time, only my dad answered. Hey, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. I found a loan, but to unlock the full amount, I need a co-signer. You wouldn't have to pay a cent. Just your name. Another pause. They were big on pauses. He cleared his throat. Look, your mother and I talked. We're just not comfortable putting our names on anything official right now, especially with the economy the way it is. You mean uncertainty like your granddaughter's spinal cord? It's not that simple. Isn't it, though? He hesitated. I've had identity theft before. You never know with these online lenders. It's a national bank. I'm sorry, he said soft. I really am. I nodded, even though he couldn't see me. Thanks anyway. I hung up. This time I didn't sit down. I walked. Not fast, not angry, just with purpose. Because something in me had shifted. I was no longer the daughter pleading for help. I was the mother of a girl with 18 years of kindness, courage, and brilliance in her bones. And I would not let her pay the price for someone else's cowardice. That night, I stayed up emailing, calling, texting. I messaged anyone I thought might remember me kindly. Former coworkers, church acquaintances, the mom of Isla's old friend from ballet. One woman I hadn't spoken to in years wired me $200 without a question. Another dropped off snacks and a sympathy card with a $50 bill folded inside. I made a spreadsheet. Not just to track who gave what, but because it kept me sane. Every name was proof that good people still existed. That family could be found in the least expected places. Ela never asked questions. She watched me type and tally and call, curled under a blanket with her earbuds in. But I knew she felt it. The weight of the silence from the people who should have stepped up. And the miracle of strangers who did. When her best friend's mom walked in with a credit card and said, $20,000 limit. Use what you need. I almost collapsed. I tried to hand it back. She shook her head. You're a good mom. Let someone be good to you. We paid in full, before midnight. I signed the consent form with a borrowed pen and a steady hand. And still, not a word from my parents. Not until they started hearing the whispers. But by then, it was far too late. Around 2 a.m., I found myself standing alone by the vending machine, holding a warm bottle of water and watching it fog up in my hand. That's when I made the decision to post about Ela's situation online. Not with blame, not with names, just the facts. Within an hour, it was shared 40 times. People began tagging me, messaging, asking how they could help. A single mom in Texas Venmo'd me $15. A retired nurse from my hometown mailed a handwritten note with a $100 check inside. Someone offered hotel points in case I needed a place to rest. Ela slept through most of it, but I could feel the shift. Hope. Just a little. And then, my phone buzzed again. A man I hadn't spoken to since college sent a message. I saw your post. I just wired $500. I remember you helped me pass econ freshman year. I never forgot. I didn't either. Every ping, every dollar, every stranger's name that popped up on that spreadsheet felt like stitches pulling me back together. 2 weeks after the surgery, I stood across the street from my parents' house holding the envelope that would ruin their week, and maybe their lives. It was early evening. The sun sat low enough to blind me through the windshield. But I didn't lower the visor. I liked the sting in my eyes. It kept me from thinking too hard. Or maybe it distracted me from the low-grade nausea that had taken up permanent residence in my gut since Greg's call. They were due back from their cruise that day. An 11-day refined coastal getaway with butler service, sunset wine tastings, and no cell signal for emergencies. I had tracked the return flight like it was a NASA launch. Every layover, every weather delay, I knew it before they did. Isa sat beside me in the passenger seat, legs still braced, earbuds in, scrolling something mindless. She didn't ask questions. She knew why we were there. I don't want to talk to them, she said softly. You won't have to, I replied. She nodded, muttered good, and went back to whatever she was watching. Her silence said more than any outburst ever could. 10 minutes later, their car pulled up. My mother stepped out in a flowing white resort dress, the kind of thing that screams, I vacation better than you. My dad followed, tugging a suitcase that probably cost more than my month's salary. They didn't notice us until I opened my car door. My mom froze. I walked across the street with the envelope in hand, heels crunching on their perfectly maintained gravel driveway. What's this? She asked, instantly wary. I smiled, but it didn't reach my eyes. You've been served. She blinked. My dad, fumbling with the trunk, looked up. His eyes dropped to the envelope, then flicked back to mine. You're joking, he said, but his voice cracked halfway through the sentence. I said nothing, just turned and walked back to my car like the conversation was over. Because it was. Behind me, my mother shrieked my name. My dad called something too, maybe wait, or you don't have to do this. But I did. I had to. Because when Greg called, everything changed. What do you mean Isla didn't get the inheritance? He asked, like I'd just told him gravity stopped working. I mean, my parents got everything. The house, the stocks, the antique coin collection Grandma swore would be worth something. Greg was quiet for a beat. That doesn't make sense, he finally said. Margaret left it all to Isla. I know. I drafted the will. I nearly dropped the phone. What? It was all in a trust. Your parents were just trustees. It was supposed to transfer to Ela when she turned 18. She turned 18 6 months ago. They never notified the bank, never filed the paperwork, never even told the trust manager. They just kept it. I felt the blood leave my face. I was shaking. That's not just unethical, Greg said. That's theft. She's a legal adult. That money was never theirs. And suddenly it all snapped into focus. The remodel, the luxury handbags, the car with the bow for Megan's kids, the sudden prosperity they never explained. They didn't just refuse to help with Isla's surgery. They used her money to buy themselves a better life. They let her risk paralysis while they drank cocktails under a cabana bought with her future. And worst of all, they never even planned to tell us. The next few days were a blur of paperwork, calls, signatures, and strategy sessions. Greg wasn't just a good lawyer. He was a bloodhound with a law degree and a grudge. Apparently, he'd adored my grandmother. And once he read through the trust and confirmed how blatantly my parents had violated every condition, he looked at me with narrowed eyes and said, "They messed with the wrong girl." It took everything in me not to cry, because for the first time in weeks, someone saw Issa not as a burden or an afterthought, but as someone worth fighting for. We filed, and suddenly, silence was no longer an option for my parents. It started with voicemails, one from my mom, soft and trembling. "We didn't know. It's all a misunderstanding." Then another, firmer. "You're blowing this out of proportion. No need to involve lawyers. Let's talk like family." But it was too late for that. The day they chose a luxury cruise over their granddaughter's spine was the day they stopped being family. A week after they were served, I got a letter. Handwritten. My dad's familiar blocky script. We always planned to give her something, just not all at once. We were managing it carefully. You of all people should understand how risky young people can be with large sums. I crumpled it and tossed it straight in the trash. The same day, Megan texted. Megan, the golden child. "Hey, Mom and Dad are devastated. Can you please just drop this? You're tearing everything apart." I replied with a screenshot of the hospital bill. No caption, just the numbers. She never responded. Meanwhile, Greg dug deeper. Turns out they hadn't just withheld the trust. They'd actively moved funds between personal accounts, made luxury purchases, and failed to report large withdrawals. The trust manager had never even been contacted. They were hoping no one would notice. They didn't count on me. They definitely didn't count on Issa. She wasn't quiet anymore. She sat in on every call, asked sharp questions, requested copies of every document. She started reading up on financial law. One night, I walked into her room and found her highlighting a clause in a legal textbook. "Just making sure no one tries to gaslight me in court," she said without looking up. I didn't say anything. I just turned away so she wouldn't see me cry. Greg scheduled a mediation before we went to court. One last chance to settle, quietly. They showed up, my parents, looking tired, underdressed, like they'd aged a decade in 2 weeks. My mother barely made eye contact. Greg laid it all out. The trust documents, the financial trail, the texts, the receipts, every dollar they touched. My parents sat there, shrinking. Then Issa leaned forward. "I don't want an apology," she said, her voice cold and clear. "I want the money that's mine. I want every penny you spent on yourselves and Megan's kids while you ignored me. And I want your names off anything with mine on it. legal, financial, emotional. My dad opened his mouth. Isa cut him off. You had a chance. You made your choice. My mom whispered, sweetheart, please. Isa didn't flinch. Don't call me that. Then she added, this isn't revenge, it's restitution. There was silence, so thick you could hear the pen click in Greg's hand. And then Isa looked them both dead in the eyes and said, you taught me not to expect anything. Thank you. Because now I know how to take everything back on my own. Greg nodded beside her. And the court will agree. They refused the settlement. Greg smiled. See you in court. The courtroom was silent when the verdict came down. Guilty. Financial theft. Breach of fiduciary duty. Deception involving an illegal heir. Due to their age and the non-violent nature of the crime, the judge handed down a sentence of 1 year probation and community service. No jail. Yet. But they weren't walking away untouched. A week later, someone snapped a photo of my mother in a neon vest picking up trash along a freeway. Another showed my dad behind a folding table at a city office, organizing paper files with a look of complete defeat. We didn't share the photos, but we saved them. Not out of pettiness, out of closure. Then came Greg's final call. You might want to sit down. Turns out, my parents had tried one last trick. Transferring undeclared funds to an offshore account under my aunt's name. There was a paper trail, digital records, all of it pointing back to them. Greg filed immediately. This time the court didn't blink. Fraud. Asset concealment. Intent to defraud the court. They showed up to the second trial in the same tired clothes they'd worn for community service. My mom didn't speak. My dad didn't look up. Their lawyer didn't smile. They were sentenced to 1 full year in prison. No suspension. No house arrest. No negotiation. Handcuffed in front of us, they were let out without fanfare. Isa didn't cry. She didn't cheer. She just stood still, taller somehow. She finally received what was hers. Not just the money, but the truth, the clarity, the power of being seen and chosen by people who had nothing to gain. She opened a long-term investment account and named it the Compound Project, a tribute to the lessons Grandma Margaret had given her. She said she plans to grow it slowly, methodically, for the future she'll choose on her own terms. She told me quietly, this isn't for now, it's for something good later. And then she added, as she filed the final document herself, one handwritten line under her signature. Some people don't deserve forgiveness, just consequences. I didn't reply. I didn't need to. I just nodded and watched my daughter walk forward without ever looking back. Too far or just far enough? You tell me. Have you ever had to choose justice over family? Drop your thoughts below. And if this story hit something in you, hit subscribe, ring the bell, and stay with us. Because sometimes walking away isn't a weakness. It's the start of power.